So we've been partnering with them for a while now to just kind of talk about kind of like what it means to submit these applications for this award coming up, the Great Rivers Biennial 2018 in the summer. So I'm going to turn it over to Bridget now, but at the end, both myself and Lyndon will be here throughout to answer kind of questions that you may want to have. All right.
Well, thanks, Alex. And do you can you slides?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
And let me go to present.
Well, just to give a quick introduction of myself, as Alex said, I am a co-founder of Midwest Artist Project Services. Liz Dykeman and myself founded MAPS in 2012. We both realized there was a need here in St. Louis for providing professional development and other kinds of workshops, educational workshops and services to artists, because there were a lot of opportunities, but not a lot of chances to sit down with someone and have them review your grant application or talk about marketing your project. And most especially, our fiscal sponsorship services are something that is pretty unique to St. Louis as well. I'm currently the Director of Development for Tower Grove Park. I previously was at the St. Louis Art Museum for 8 years doing institutional giving, so grant writing, corporate sponsorship, and government funding. And before that, I was at the New York Foundation for the Arts, NYFA, in New York City, also doing fundraising for them, but also where I got into the swing of artist education. NYFA provides a lot of workshops and education for artists in New York City and actually throughout the state. And actually just to put it in perspective, you might think there's a lot of people in this room, and there are, and I think later on we'll see there will probably be between 150 to 200 applications for the Great Rivers Biennial. And that is a lot of applications. But just to put it in perspective, NYFA also has an artist fellowship program. They give 150 fellowships per year of $7,000 for artists living in New York State. They get 14,000 applications for those. So, out of a pool of 200, your chances are a lot better than 14,000. So, first of all, let me applaud all of you for being here and for committing to apply to the Great Rivers Biennial. It is a wonderful opportunity for artists here in the St. Louis area. So I'm so glad to see you all taking the chance and submitting your wonderful ideas. So let's get started. As I mentioned, I just wanted to give a little bit of commercial for MAPS and our services. We also provide application reviews. So if you would like someone to look over your application, you can send us an email. Did everybody get a little slip? Already notes on it? Are they still floating around somewhere? Maybe 50 of them. No? Yes? Oh, great. Passing it on. And we'll move to the next slide. Won't spend too much time on MAPS. We do have a fiscal sponsorship program. You can read a little bit more about that, but it does allow individual artist projects to receive grants and tax-deductible donations. So we don't give you the money, but we help you get the money for your project. So since you're working on your project for the Great Rivers Biennial anyway, you might consider applying to MAPS for fiscal sponsorship. Our applications are open April 3rd through May 30th. So you can go to our website to read a little bit more about what fiscal sponsorship entails. We also have our own workshops coming up in April and in May. And then finally, we also have an internship that we are offering, our first ever paid internship this summer. We're looking for an individual to help us build a new online resource to connect artists to professional service providers like accountants, bookkeepers, things like that. So if that's something that's interesting to you, check it out. All right, so getting to the Great Rivers Biennial. What we'll cover today is the purpose of the program, applicant qualifications, the actual review process itself, so what happens after you hit send, doesn't just go into a black hole, the selection criteria of what are the jurors looking for, and the actual application components themselves. We'll talk a little bit about art statements, for examples, all that kind of stuff, which some of you probably know, but maybe would want a refresher, and if you're starting from scratch, this is a great place to begin. So just real quick before we get into it, I just kind of want to do a survey. How many of you have applied for this opportunity in the past? Just one? All right. How many of you have applied for any kind of grant, any kind of award? Great, more than half. Awesome. Just a quick, to make sure I'm sort of covering the different types of work samples, I'm going to throw out a medium if it's in your wheelhouse. If you raise your hand, painting, about half, more than half, drawing, video, not much video, sound, 3D sculpture, ceramics, anything I missed? Oh, photography, of course. You think I would? No, I'm a photographer. All right. Excellent, excellent. Great. Well, let's get into it. When we get to the work samples, I'll try and cover, try and make it as broad as possible. But if you have a specific question about something, please feel free to jump in there. So the purpose of the exhibition and the award is a collaborative program presented by CAM, and the funding for the award comes from the Gateway Foundation. It is meant to identify emerging and mid-career artists. Now, notice that that doesn't have an age bracket around it. Anyone can be emerging at any age. Anyone can be mid-career at any age. But the idea is that it is not necessarily for artists that have extensively shown outside of St. Louis, have had big museum exhibitions. The idea is to showcase emerging talent. The winners receive a grant of $20,000 and will be featured in the Great Rivers Biennial in 2018. Alex had sent me this article that was on the Observer News website just last week, which called out the CAM Biennial, the Great Rivers Biennial, as sort of one to keep an eye on for those folks who are interested in seeing regional talent across the country. So I think there's a really nice quote at the bottom from Juan William Chavez. Some of you might know him from the Northside Workshop or from other art exhibits around town. After he received the Biennial Award in 2008, he then went on to be invited to join a group exhibition in the Netherlands, and just in the past 5 years was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship. And in that quote, he really acknowledges that the Great Rivers Biennial was kind of a launching point for his career. And I think that speaks to something we'll talk about with the jurors. Even if you are not selected for this award, your work is going to be seen by some amazing people. So let me again applaud you for taking the opportunity just to get your work seen by these national level curators and artists. So the application deadline, which you probably all have tattooed on the inside of your eyeball, is April 28th, 2017 at midnight. 10 semifinals will be chosen by June 9th. Studio visits, which I think are fairly unique. This was introduced just in the last cycle. Will happen between June 19th and 20th. Winners announced June 30th. That's a pretty quick turnaround. And exhibition on view in 2018. Okay. So eligibility. You see the categories up there. I didn't hear anyone say anything that was sort of outside of those what's been identified. The residency qualification is one that sometimes there are questions about. I would say if you have any questions about that residency requirement, figure it out, talk to the camp staff, ask Alex tonight, because you wouldn't want to do all this work and then realize that you're not eligible because of a residency requirement. But you can see the artist not only must currently reside in the metro area, but must have lived here for at least 1 year prior to the application deadline. And then they ask that you continue to hang out here, and especially if you do receive the award, the museum wants you to be accessible, to be around, to actually be here to work on it. No past awardees. You may be a degree-seeking graduate student, but not otherwise an undergraduate student. And actually, I did have a question about that, Alex. So, by student, do you mean a full-time student? If you're an adult and you're taking a class or taking a single adult education class, is that?
Yeah, I think that's probably fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just not a full-time undergraduate.
Correct.
Okay. And then make sure that you're available for the studio visit period. It sounds like the jurors would be flexible at working with you with your schedule within that time, but if you're planning a trip to Australia, maybe don't plan during that week. Okay. So what happens after you submit? After the deadline is passed, the applications are reviewed for eligibility and completeness. So make sure it is complete before you submit. Jurors will review the work samples and exhibition proposals. We'll talk a little bit more about each of those. Important to note that the CAM staff is not a part of this process. So you can, feel free to send Alex and Lyndon chocolates and flowers and whatever else you think they might enjoy, but it is not going to influence your application review. The work samples and application materials are reviewed and graded electronically by the jurors. The jurors then select the 10 semifinalists. They then conduct studio visits, and then once the winners are selected, the camp staff works very closely with them to develop what the final exhibition will be. So I think it's very helpful. I've been a grant writer for 17 years, and whenever I'm thinking about an opportunity, the first thing I do is look at the past awardees. It is the best way to read between the lines of application requirements, guidelines, rules, what they say they want to do, what they say they want to fund. It is the best way to actually get your brain around it is to look at the past award minutes. I think it's, I'm a visual learner myself, so this always helps me. So this is your installation from last year. So Lyndon was an awardee in 2016. I won't necessarily read everything there, but I think it's good to kind of go through and look and see what the past winners' work looks like. And this is all on the CAM website as well. So do you mind going to the next two quickly while I take a sip of water? So video work by Biennial. Did most of you get to come see this a couple years ago? So you got a sense of what it's like installed in the museum. And then Kate Foley's sculptural painting, screen printing, sculptures. So the jurors, you don't need to make your work necessarily appealing to these particular people. I think, however, it is worth noting the very, very high level of professional folks that are going to be looking at your work. So you have internationally represented artists, curator of Crystal Bridges, associate curator of Lima. How often do you think they might come to a studio visit, or how often will you get a chance to get your work in front of them, right? So you want to show them your very best work. It's a very exciting opportunity. So, and kudos again for getting these folks on board. It really speaks a lot to the quality of this biennial. So, those important people, what are they looking for? A clear sense of vision, an artistic signature. Hard to put into words, but we all know the feeling when you walk into a room and you see a work of art and you immediately can identify the artist, or you immediately know what school it's from, right? It's a very clear artistic vision that comes through, a compelling vision. So that's what they're going to be looking for. Work that is engaged in a larger art world conversation, shows an awareness of what is happening in contemporary art on a global scale. And I interpret that to mean it doesn't necessarily need to be responding to everything that's happening in the contemporary art world, but it should show an awareness of what's going on in contemporary art. I think it's meant to differentiate between maybe a landscape painting. If it's going to be a landscape painting, how is it a landscape painting that's reflective of what's going on in contemporary art, or has an intellectual approach, or some interesting content behind it? And then just overall professionalism of your application. So high quality, thoughtfully curated work samples that you put the time and effort into putting your very best work forward. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. Clear, concise, and intentional writing in your artist statement and exhibition proposal. And again, if you want somebody to look at your writing before you submit, you got your maps head out there. And then an exhibition proposal that is specific to this opportunity. So if you cut and paste from something else and don't change a thing, they're probably going to miss. Yeah.
Do you think that, making our work, should we imply that our work is engaged in a larger art world conversation, or, not referencing 10 things, but pinpointing one artist, in your writing?
Oh, you're talking about in your writing?
Should we explicitly say, this is how my work relates to this that's going on?
We're going to portion in a moment. You know, in talking about what are they looking for, you know, this is really sort of in the overall, your work samples plus what you're proposing for your exhibition proposal. So I think what you're asking about, we'll talk about when we get to the artist statement part and the proposal part of it. But, you know, this is, I think, some of the best ways to answer why did they pick this work instead of that. And it's art, right? I mean, it's hard sometimes to say, well, this is better than that or whatever, but I think these are maybe some key things to keep in mind if you're thinking about putting your very best work forward. We're putting the most competitive application together that you can. So, the application is very simple, but that does not mean it is not something you should spend a lot of time on. So, artist statement, we'll get to all this in more detail. So the statement, the actual exhibition proposal, what you would like to do should you be selected, your work samples, and Alex, I just wanted to check, there was a reduction in the number of work samples.
It was, yeah.
Last year it was 8, this year it's 5.
Correct.
So that means they have to be 30% you have fewer to submit. You can write image credits or short descriptions for your work samples, and then your artist CV and resume. And I know we're going to get to it, but I just want to say, no one is ever awarded or denied an opportunity based on the length of their CV. That is, no one gets a prize because they have a really long CV. It is merely for the jurors to understand where you are in your art career. So do not let that intimidate you if you're kind of inhaling sharply.
And Bridget, I will mention that there are only 5 images allowed, but because there's a website component, jurors do tend to look at those websites and kind of like, you can dig pretty deep and pretty quickly with that.
Excellent. Pro tip.
Yeah.
All right, you glad you came to this workshop?
You had a question.
About the artist CV? I was just saying, do not be intimidated if you do not have a long artist CV. And I'm going to show you a sample of an artist CV and give you some resources for where you can find different formats. But I just don't want anyone to go, oh, I don't have an artist CV. Oh, no, I've never had a solo gallery show. I probably shouldn't apply for this. No, it's just so that the jurors know where you are in your art career. Okay, so now we're going to get into the actual components of the application. So, who has an artist statement? If you don't mind, you put up your hand if you've written an artist statement. Excellent. Okay, so most of you, but not all. So let's get into what an artist statement is. So your artist statement is a brief description of your work, provides the reader with information about your sources, ideas, process, inspiration. It is not long, 2 to 3 paragraphs, just about 500 words. It informs the viewer about your body of work, but it doesn't need to explain the work. You do not need to get into every little nitty-gritty detail. It should support the work, but it doesn't need to replicate the work. So it also shouldn't just be purely descriptive, right? And every time that you complete a new singular body of work, you may consider updating your artist statement. So those of you who raised your hand who've written artist statements, if it's been a couple of years and you haven't gone back and revamped it after maybe you've completed a new series, or maybe you've switched medium, you might consider going back and tweaking your artist statement. Okay. If you need to start an artist statement from scratch, or if you want to maybe take a fresh look at what you've got, some questions you might start to do a little journal writing on. What might viewers want to know about your work that they can't get just from looking at it? I've never seen your work before. If I walk into a room, what might there be something, what might you want me to know about it? Where does your inspiration come from? And that a lot of artist statements start that way. My inspiration comes from that. Is it a particular part of your background or part of your identity? Is it something from pop culture, something from nature? If you're referencing, there was the question about if you're referencing another artist or a tradition of art history. If you're coming from that, definitely include that. What about your process? Either creative or constructive might the viewer find interesting. And that is always going to be interesting. The creative process or the construction process, how you made it. That's always going to be interesting to viewers. That's, you know, I worked in an art museum for 8 years, and that's the most common question. Well, how did they make that, right? If you have interesting materials, if it's an interesting process, you definitely want to include that. What might be meaningful about the materials that you work with? If there's a certain type of textile or fabric that's important to you, if food is something that's incorporated into your work, if it's experiential, why, what's the connection there? What's meaningful about it? And where does this current body of work fit in with your overall development as an artist? Right. We're all on a journey. And where does this body of work fall on your journey? How did you get here? Just a few more tips. An effective artist statement welcomes people to your art, no matter how much or little they know. Basically, don't use too jargony, language. Even though the people that will be looking at your application have all kinds of experience and all kinds of fancy degrees, you still want to try and make your artist statement accessible. Make I statements rather than you statements. You don't ever want to be dictating. The viewer's going to feel angst when they look at my work. The work is expressing what you are feeling, right? Use active words. Oh my gosh, my fonts are like all over the place. I'm so sorry. If they're designers, I'm so sorry. So use active words when you're writing your artist statement, right? Get out the thesaurus, explore, analyze. I want to subvert a tradition, or I want to juxtapose these two ideas next to each other, right? That's really engaging. Use those active verbs. If you still need help getting started, one of the best things to do is to schedule a studio visit with someone who doesn't know your work very well. Studio visit could be wherever your work is, or it can be, you can go to them if you want to just show them images. But asking people who are not familiar with your work to respond to it, listening to the questions that they ask, is a great way to get started. And then finally, err on the side of brevity. Definitely leave them wanting more, right? Give too little, not too much. So those of you who have come to this workshop before know that I use this artist statement all the time. And I actually added another one this year, but I spent a long while trying to find another artist statement that I thought was as good. And frankly, I think this one is still great. And I will also just give a plug for this book, The Artist's Guide by Jackie Battenfield. Jackie Battenfield is a working artist herself, but she's written a number of books about making a living as an artist, and they're excellent. She's a great writer. She's very funny, but she's got a lot of really great content. So I will just read through this quickly. First of all, you can see it's not long, right? It's not long, but there's a lot in there. So I began using a typewriter for its obvious function to record my thoughts and ideas. Communicating is a crucially constant struggle for me. So already she's kind of giving you some context, right? How did she come to use a typewriter? The more I typed, the more the letters and words on the pages began to take on a new function in language. My discovery of this new language, created with my typewriter and paper, was one of patterns and grids formed by punctuation marks at the depth. It was as if the typewriter was experiencing a breakdown, and this breakdown was my breakthrough. Beautiful sentence. And discovered a new way to communicate. So she's taking you along on her journey, right? Here's why the typewriter was important. Here's how I came to it. Here's why I decided to use it. Here's why it's meaningful for me. So without even seeing her work, right, you already kind of have a sense that it's about language. It's about this machine. So let's see her work on the next slide. I also just like her work. So let's look at the next artist statement. So a little bit simpler. Classically trained visual artist and printmaker. I've been exploring, so there's a good active word, right? I've been exploring the relationship between people and their built environment. My first interventions took the form of wheat pasting words. So again, she's kind of taking us where she is in her artistic career. More recently, now she's been doing the more this project-based work in different parts of the world. I'm just curious, can anyone guess who this artist is? Yes. One of my favorite writing tips applicable for either your artist statement or the exhibition proposal. Show, don't tell. Has anyone taken a creative writing class? I've heard that. Right? Show, don't tell. Active voice, not passive voice. Write about yourself and your work, not about what the viewer should feel or think. Avoid defensive language. Again, if you find yourself going on a Facebook rant, edit it out. Keeping it accessible, and of course, have a friend or maps proofread for pleasure. Any other questions about artist statements before we move on?
Can I say one?
Oh yeah.
I mean, one thing about artist statements that's really, I mean, crucial for me at least is I like to warn against like creating a situation in which the person who's reading the artist statement can like don't give them opportunities to challenge what it is you're saying. So don't tell them your work is good because that doesn't happen for everyone. You know, place the focus on things that you are interested in, obsessed with, fascinated with. Like your artist statement should be about kind of explaining the questions that you have in your work, not necessarily like the definitive things you think your work is good, because again, that doesn't happen the same way for all viewers.
I think, kind of to that same point, I was having a conversation with an artist once about his artist statement, and I was encouraged, he was getting kind of lost in his, like, the biographical parts of it, and I encouraged him to really focus on what he was passionate about his excitement. What are you excited about? It's about that. And he said, oh, so it's not actually about me. It's about this, what I'm excited about. And I was like, yes. So sometimes it kind of helps to have that moment of, you know, you're not writing your autobiography, right? You're not writing your like self-analysis. You're writing about this thing that you're excited about exploring and you want to share with somebody.
I would actually, about the question about mentioning other artists, I don't like to do that.
So you think it should be implied? You should talk about your art in a way that obviously my audience can see that it is referencing.
Well, because mentioning artists, especially like, you know, an artist does like a couple of things. One, it name drops someone famous, which like, you know, that's automatically placing you in comparison with their work, which is not a good place as a commercial artist. And then like people are interested in artists for a number of different reasons. So like those people may be familiar with that artist's work and may not see the same connection that you see. So you just, again, you don't want to set up a situation in which, you know, they're disagreeing with your stance and what you're proposing. Just like you say.
So the broader idea that like we're working with ideas that are relevant and not that we need to specifically make connections. They should just kind of be aware that this is a contemporary or, you know, current.
Yeah. Great. So let's talk about the exhibition proposal. So before you begin your application, make sure that you've taken some time to scribble out what your ideas are, where you're going. Because the clearer that it is communicated to the jurors what you're proposing, the more successful that your application will be. You know, the more they can visualize it in their mind, the more they have a clear idea of, oh, I'm going to walk into the galleries and have this experience, the more competitive that you will be. So, you know, just even before you log in and start your application, you know, the actual application itself is not the place to be like thinking of what you're going to write, right? So, you know, start making those notes. Start writing down your bullet points or whatever your creative writing process is to get it down as clear as you can before you start cut and paste it into the application. Because there's no questions there, right? I don't know if anybody who's logged in or started the application. It's a box that says, give us your exhibition proposal. That's it. So, it's not, you know, it's not happening. So, and it is, of course, extremely important. So, I have given you some suggested bullet points to follow. So you want to start with a basic description of the project. So this is your kind of one-sentence elevator speech, as much as you can nail it down into one sentence, right? The viewers of my Brick Rivers Biennial exhibition will see this amazing thing. They will have this experience. They will walk away changed for the better. but it's specific to something. So again, what will the viewer experience be like? How is the project specific to camp, Great Rivers Biennial? And that doesn't necessarily mean that your project needs to be specific to St. Louis, but how is it specific to this opportunity, right? This is a very unique gallery space. How does it contribute to the global contemporary art conversation? This is a major art museum, and your proposal should say, yes, my work deserves to be here. How does this project reflect your signature as an artist, right? We talked about your artist statement and that compelling vision of what you're interested in and what you are exploring. So how does this project reflect that? What would the timeline be? Getting a little more practical here, but is this something that would come together quickly, or would you be working on it that entire year? Is it something that would have a long-term component? Very basic project budget. Not that you need to do a lot of math, but keep in mind the exhibition award is $20,000. That should be your barometer for the ambition of your project. Right? I mean, we looked at the winners from last year, the images from last year. I mean, Nanette went to Wyoming, right? Tate created those big sculptures. Lyndon made all the sculpture. I mean, he turned it into a basketball court. Ambitious, right? So think about something that matches the ambition of that $20,000. But also is not more than $20,000. Right? If you're going to cover the galleries in solid gold, you might think through that. And then describe how the project would spur the creation of new work for you. How is this the next step in your artistic career? Right? So, how to get started. If included in the 2018 Great Rivers Biennial, I would do this. Again, we talked about what are you interested in? What are you excited about? If you're not excited about it, the jurors are not going to be excited about it. That passion has to come through in what you are proposing. Right? We've all been in the same room with someone who is over the moon about something, and it's infectious, right? So you've got to communicate that. Where does this project fit within the context of your career? How does your work relate to the contemporary art world? Again, we talked about the ambition of the $20,000, and you can include a rendering of your proposed project as one of your work samples. They don't tell you that on the application. But if you have a clear enough vision that now it's not mandatory, but if you can create a rendering of it, you can include that as a work sample, if you feel comfortable doing it. Yeah.
You had mentioned the website being available. Do you want to limit renderings to one, or would you benefit by using all 5 of your images as rendering if they have access to your website?
So I did include a rendering when it was 8. And it was just one image.
Okay.
So I wouldn't do more than that.
Okay,
5 for sure.
so 1.
That was also the second time I applied. And so I did go about it a little differently, like with a bit more intention. So and it was simple. It wasn't like a Rhino 3D virtual rendering or anything. It was just kind of like a simple like flat, Photoshop, kind of basically like a digital collage of a really simple image of what I imagined it looking like. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I would do with 5 images. Just like I didn't realize it was being cut, and that's a significant amount. I mean, 8 is like ridiculous enough, you know what I mean? So like 5 is really tiny. So I think that if the rendering really does help them to kind of get a sense of what it is that you want to do, and there's like a really nice kind of transition from like your work samples to that rendering, then by all means include it.
I also mentioned that like the website's additional like support, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it'll actually go to the website. Right? So it's like these are supporting material. I mean, everything's supporting materials, right? Your application as a whole, but everything's like supporting materials from images to rendering.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, even though we talked about it not, you know, in the grand scheme of things, 200 is a really great pool to be in. It's still 200 applications they have to review. And if you had to review 200 applications, would you go to the website for all of them, you know? So, yeah, so I do think that that puts it in
I
context.
expect that those 5 are all of us. You hope to see the website, but.
There was another question. Yes.
Do you mind if we take a picture of what you're?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and then this video is also going to be on the CAM website too, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we usually put the slideshow on
Mhm.
there.
Great. So just to talk about logistics for a moment as you're thinking through your exhibition proposal. So the selected artists are responsible for all the production. Now that doesn't mean, now they could use some of the award funds to pay people to assist in that. However, it doesn't mean you call up Cam and say, hey, I need someone, I need a carpenter to build me. Like, you know, you're the project manager for that. The CAM installation crew will actually do the installation, however. And then the walls are already constructed and ready for the installation. So the walls are the walls. Okay. All right, so we'll talk about the uploads. Artist CV or resume, and 5 work sample images. We're talking about the CV first. So I asked about artist statement. How about artist CV? Who has an artist CV? Okay, so not now. Okay, so let's take a look at what goes on your artist CV. So as I said, it does not have to be long. It is not the basis of your getting this or any other award. It just provides context for where you are in your career. And then it shouldn't be too long. Those of you who do have extensive art teaching or other types of related experience, I would really recommend you not go more than 3 pages. If you can get it down to 1 page, that's probably better. And it only includes art career information. So let's look at what goes on there. Any kind of art education, exhibitions that you may have been, either group exhibitions, solo exhibitions, any kind of awards or residencies, a bibliography if you've been mentioned in any press, any collections that your work might be in, any public commissions, screenings, and any other art-related professional activities. So if you've taught a class, if you taught a workshop at the library, if you have done something maybe at Art Scope, anything like that, you can include on your artist CV. But your other types of work experience don't necessarily go on there. And can we go back for 1 second? So this is the College Art Association. If you have not gone to their website, it is a treasure chest of resources for things like samples of artist CVs. So I really, really recommend checking out the College Art Association's website, and you'll see a link for resources, and you can download samples and templates for all kinds of stuff like this. Okay, work samples. You're going to upload 5 images or video sound files. I think that's still the same dimensions, right? For 200 dpi?
Yeah.
Great. And then follow the directions for labeling, which is very easy to not follow the directions for labeling. Follow the directions for labeling. So, curating your work samples.
So, if I recall,
Yeah.
Submittal was kind of annoying in that you can't, it doesn't like organize the things you upload in alphabetical order, like it's actually in the order that you upload them. So have everything ready and do it in alphabetical order. Otherwise, it would just feel really
Mhm.
I have a question on the images. What if you allow your works live in books format, like the word is a book? How do you suggest that?
Yeah, that's, do you want to take that? That's a user's choice, really. I mean, like, if you're a book artist, like, a lot of times you'll take a sample of something within the book. Sometimes you can create, like, multiple image page layouts.
Yeah, I mean, composite images help sometimes. So, like, yeah, you can have, like, you know, one JPEG could be, like, a few different details. I would say maybe no more than, like, 3 tops. But actually,
Composite or file?
huh?
Like 3 images composite.
In one
Okay.
JPEG, yeah.
Yes, kind of 3 page look.
Yeah. But then maybe
video is?
There's probably a file
I
size.
think there's a file size.
Okay. Alright. I mean, we're gonna show how quickly the jurors will go through the work samples. So you'll get a sense of how short the video probably should be, because even if you make it a minute, they still might not watch that thing.
I would just want to know your opinion on like composite photos, whenever it's really large scale. So sometimes I need to show details to tell the story. And I never know how to, because I don't want to take up the images doing detail shots, so sometimes I'll put composite photos together. But I don't know how that seems so much on the outside.
I don't know, I've heard conflicting things. Some encourage it with like no more than 2 or 3 images within a single, and others like totally say don't do that.
Right.
So I don't know. I've done it, and I have no idea what it was.
I think if it's clear, I mean, my take on it, now I'm not in the jury room, but my take on it would be, if it's clear that you are showing the detail of a larger work, I think that no one's going to challenge that. I think it's, if you were compositing photos, so that you could submit 10 work samples instead of 10 different, images instead of the 5 that everyone else is sticking to, I think that would probably perhaps smudge your application bit. Okay. So, curating your work samples. And there's lots written about how to curate your work samples for an application. It is hard. It is hard to put together 5 work samples. It is challenging. So make sure you allow enough time to really sit down and think about what you want to submit. Select works that are no more than 5 years old if possible. I recommend that, and inevitably someone says, well, I've got something from 14 years ago. It's not a hard and fast rule. However, you may want to make sure your work is still relevant to what you put in the exhibition proposal and to the other work samples that you're going to submit, right? Depth over breadth. This is the Hilliard Darwin's moment, right? And this is where it gets hard, because you want to show, sometimes it's tempting to say, well, I have this awesome drawing that I did, and then also I have a sculpture that I made, and even though they're both awesome, but they don't necessarily look like they were made by the same person. That clarity of vision, that very first bullet point that we talked about, you want the jurors to get a very clear sense of you as an artist as you are representing yourself in this application, right? I mean, we've all seen sort of the retrospective exhibits of famous artists, right? And what they were doing when they were 20, what they were doing when they were 70, very often very different, right? So we're just looking at how you are presenting yourself in this application. Quality of work samples is of the utmost importance. So get a high-res image, borrow a camera, find a photographer, find somebody with a high-res scanner, get access to that. You really don't want your work to be compromised because of a low-quality work sample image. So, some phone cameras are great, but make sure that it looks great blown up on a projector like this, right? That was something, like if we were to go back to that Alison Sperfella, we don't necessarily need to do that now, but you saw kind of the blue work of art. If Alice were to turn that monitor around, that blue would be so much more vibrant. But all the jurors are going to see is what's on the wall, right? So you want a really high quality image. Place the artwork on a neutral background, keep in lighting, make sure you've got the right color intensity, that it's showing up the way that you want it. Fill the frame and remove distracting elements. And that may seem like it goes without saying, but as I mentioned, I work for NIFA, where they have of the 14,000 applications, and I would sit in on the jury panel reviews, and people would just put their artwork up in their bedrooms with like dirty laundry in the corner. Guess what the jurors are looking at, right? Not the art. So just take the time to make sure you have a good quality samples. Okay. So for installations, performances, or interactive works of art, make sure that your work sample image or video captures the depth of field. needed for them to understand it. Again, we talked about the detail image to really give a sense of what the experience is like. If it's interactive, you may need to recruit a friend to, if you don't have an installation shot, you may need to recruit somebody to help show what the experience of the work is like. And again, or if it's something that's performative, you may wish to include a description of the performance in the caption that goes with it. Okay? So, as this next, going through the different.
This is going through the slides.
Okay, so Alex the juror
Yeah.
will now review work samples, and I'll tell you the artist's name is Matthew Delegate. He's a friend of mine, so I know he won't mind if I use his work samples for this. When you're thinking about curating your work samples, this is how quickly the jurors will look at them. And I apologize because I didn't update this to 5, so there's actually 8 here. So, but this is how quickly it will go.
All right, I'm doing my best on.
Okay. That's your shot. That's it.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult.
Yeah. Again, they've got 200 to get through. And they're, how many days are they here when they do the? Oh, they do it at home.
So they do. So in terms of the jury process, they do it individually, and then they actually come together for a conference call. So
Okay.
you select the 10 for the student.
But that is, I mean, again, I mentioned the NIFA panel. I mean, this is how quickly they would go through them because they have so many to get through. So that is why your work samples have to be a sucker punch. Yeah.
I was on a MIFA number of years ago last student thing.
Oh, okay.
So we kind of went over this.
Uh-huh.
Typically, with the images, we look at first, and then like if they're interested, and then they might read the like writing components. Because like typically, sometimes it's like, well, if I'm not interested in the images, I might not even take the time to read it. How do you know how this works?
Yeah, so they're all visual people, just like all the people in this room. So the visuals are the first things, and then yes, I have found that they do visuals first.
You might never even read. May or may not.
It depends. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say never, but you know, how quickly you go through this, like depending upon what piques their interest and what they're seeing, they'll dig deeper as they get interested, right? So if there's a particular image that they're interested, that might lead them to the website, that might lead them to dig more deeper into the statement and kind of talk more with each other about it.
I mean, the writing would be like a deciding factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally has a less clear idea of what they're investigating, or maybe it's like seeing their work and be like, oh, what do they want to do? Where do they want to go from here? So that would prompt them to look more. So I think it's all important, but yeah, I would say that probably. I don't know, a lot of this I don't know, but I would imagine if I would be doing something like images first, and then I'd be curious about what's behind.
I just wanted to show you another set of work samples from an artist named Vesna Jovanovic. Max actually brought her 2 years ago here to St. Louis to talk about her work and her career as an artist. But I wanted to give you an example of, I talked about that idea of depth over breadth. And Vesna she's actually finishing up a really amazing residency right now at the Museum of Surgical Science in Chicago. But I wanted to show you her work samples so that you can see why it's not always the best idea to just put your best pieces from every aspect of your artistic career in there. So if we can go through quickly, she mostly does these illustrations with graphite and watercolor. Right. So that sculpture at the end. So she also works in ceramics quite extensively, right? But it kind of doesn't go with the rest of her work that she's included in this. So I wanted to show that to you because even though everything's high quality, it doesn't really give a singular compelling narrative about this is my artistic vision, this is what I'm interested in exploring, right? You can tell she's interested in biology and the natural world and anatomy and things like that. But then you have this very nice sculpture, but it's not really in conversation with the other work samples. So I just show that to you to kind of help you resist the urge to just put in the 5 best things you've ever done. If they're not talking to each other, and it doesn't even need to be from the same series, but if they're not talking to each other in some way, you've got to have a little bit of your own curatorial eye, and like I said, kill your darlings, and let it go and maybe put in something else that creates a more coherent narrative for someone who's only going to be looking at your work for 45 seconds. So those image credits are short descriptions. If applicable, write a brief credit line or short description for each image. Video sound file uploaded, 1 to 2 sentences. And remember to write the image number first as it corresponds to the description so they can make sure that they match up. So those short descriptions, that's where you might talk about the book. This is the viewer would flip through the book and have this experience, or the material I used for this particular work is relevant, XYZ, but again, keeping it brief, as brief as possible, right? It's not necessarily museum didactic. After the announcement is made. So, hopefully, yes?
I think did you skip a slide that showed how to save and title the file?
No.
I thought I saw something pop up like that for just a second and then it was gone.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Go back through investments.
It's at the bottom of the
Yeah,
frame.
I know what you're talking about.
It's before the image.
Yeah, it was,
It
I think,
indicated how to save the file
Yeah.
on the title.
yeah. There it is. This is what you're looking for?
Yeah.
And that's on the, when you
Okay.
get into the application, that's on there.
Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
Okay, so, won't be that fast, fortunately. Okay, so, you receive the award, you need to enter into a professional contract with the museum. You will be assigned to a gallery. You must make yourselves available for those follow-up studio visits so stick around town, right? If you are applying for other residencies or other things that might take you out of town for an extended period of time, you might just notify the camp staff of that. Artists will be asked to, or maybe asked to engage in public programming, education, workshops, tours, things that one would hope you would all be enthusiastic about participating in. And then this is a very MAPS thing to include, which is that the $20,000 award is taxable income. So you may want to work with a bookkeeper or an accountant, or just make sure you have your own spreadsheet of keeping track of all of your expenses related to the project, right? But you do have to report it as taxable income. Yes, you know. Yes?
What is this studio visiting?
So this is the studio visits after the first round of applications, right? So the top 10 finalists. Yeah, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, actually, if you want to speak to that,
Yeah.
is that the, do we turn the lights on, or we finish?
Yeah, yes.
So the studio visit is, for me, or for us, this round, it was all 3 jurors, and both curators from camp at the time, coming into your space and basically giving them a presentation on your work. So I don't know, I didn't talk at length too much about to the other finalists. For me, I kind of set up, I had things out available just to kind of show a range of like things that were relevant to the work that was in my portfolio. And then I kind of had a monitor set up and I gave like a slide presentation on my work from like as if I was talking to strangers. And so that's the studio visit, if you get to that stage, is really an opportunity to really go deep and to show the range of what you can do. And that's where they're really listening to not just how thoughtful you are, but also to see like what your experience as a maker is. And of course, obviously like kind of charm and like, your rapport with them is important. And I've heard stories of like, people being really kind of flippant or like having like more of a cold attitude, which is really off-putting. So I do think it is important to like be kind of approachable and nice and to be like receptive to questions
that point, you don't have to have a studio to do a studio visit. Yeah, it's probably on some folks' minds.
This was, so when I did it, it was in my, I had just moved like the week prior, and I had all my shit boxes put into like every other room in my apartment. My, like very small and bedroom apartment, and my studio, my living room was turned into my studio basically. So it can be really modest in terms of setup. It's really about you and the work.
And then additionally, we can offer a space like such as this. There is a formal studio to where it actually happens at the museum and you bring samples of work, things like that. So that's all possible.
And that's also something, if you are selected for a studio visit and you've never done one before, practice. Have somebody come over and pretend like they are a, curator, or pretend like they've never seen your work before, and practice what you're going to say. Think about what you want to highlight, right? And that's kind of a good practice anyway, right? Studio visits are really important for your artistic career because it invites people in to see your work. That's where people get interested in collecting. It gives people a sense of you as an artist. So they're kind of good to practice anyway, and good to get into the habit of trying to do anyway, whether or not it gets to that point of this opportunity. Other questions? Yeah.
I saw that, I'm sorry, Ms. Williams. I saw that you said 5 years. I guess I had always kind of thought 2 years was sort of an important but I wasn't sure.
As long as it still feels relevant and recent to where you are in your artistic journey now, I think that's fine. Right?
So the actual award, if you decide to work on something that's going to take your whole year, does that type of, is there limitations to what that money can be spent on, is what I'm asking. Like, if you are like, well, I'm going to have to work half as much of what I was before, is this award allowed to help me with living situation, help me pay for the studio space that I need, and that sort of thing during that year? Does that make sense? Or is it only for materials and items to build or create the work itself?
I would say that's between you and the tax person. I did use the funds to pay for a studio. I didn't have a studio outside of the home at that time, so my money went towards that. But also, that's a whole other tax conversation. But
Well, yeah, just like
use it towards
kind of what would be acceptable and what would not be acceptable kind of thing.
I think that, we talked about what you proposed for your exhibition proposal being reflective of that $20,000 award. So, so if your proposal is, I'm just going to spend $100 at Art Mart,
Yeah.
which I know no one would do, but I'm just saying, like, your proposal is going to be reflective of that. So kind of by nature, most of those funds probably would be spent on production.
Okay.
Travel or indirect expenses, such as a studio. This is where if any of you have ever written a grant for a scrappy nonprofit organization, you know how to build in some indirect expenses, right, for things that you might have needed anyway.
I don't think I detailed the budget.
There's like no,
I wasn't actually sure what it was going to really be materially. I think that if you're proposing something super ambitious, it probably makes more sense to describe how you can pay for it.
Yeah. Because the main thing is I work as a painter, so it's like, my expenses may be, $2 or $3 grand, to get big canvases or wherever that may be, but really it's time, it's months or whatever spent painting, So
I would encourage you though to think about what is it about this opportunity though that would allow you to do something you've never done before.
exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Earlier you stated that we were allowed to get help after the application process? Or
Get help with the application? Yes, that's through Max though, that's not through Cam. So did you get the little flyer? Yes, so if you want to email and set up a walk through the application and talk about your writing, that's something Max can do. We do ask for a small donation, like $5 to $10, either for Max or one of our projects. That's not burdensome, but it tends to make sure people show up to their appointments. Any other?
What was the?
I'm sorry?
Did you just say how much the services cost?
$5 to $10.
Oh, plus donation.
No, that is the difference.